just like, Right, but see how they were over here and they came over and they kind of literally took them back.
Those are called a calf, right?
Watch, if they come over, you're supposed to go.
Oh yeah, those are. It's okay.
Maybe I'm not.
Questions about them?
It's beautiful.
These are our first foals in 16 years.
Really? How old are they?
Moose, the one that's closest to us, is 3.5 months.
Oh, wow.
And Monty is 2 months and a week. 2 weeks.
Wow. Just get used to the legs.
Tell they're young though.
So
they're
born
used to
here?
them.
They were born here? They were here? They're born here?
Yes. Yeah, and we have a third one and a third mom.
Oh, wow.
But he's only 3 weeks old, so 2 weeks old.
Gorgeous.
They're Cleveland Bays, so they're a rare breed. There's only about 900 of them worldwide.
Like you identify like are they friendly horses?
These ones?
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. They'll come right up to the gate and talk to everybody, but they just got out, so they'll spend some time out in the middle and then they'll come by.
It's fun to watch them graze a little bit and
Yeah, they're good boys. Full of themselves. Well, no, we put them up. We move them. They're but they're not permanent. So they're temporary.
There's one.
They're just stacked on top of each other.
Right.
There's nothing that holds them except for the fact that they're stacked.
Not there. Hopefully get
So
that
all
water.
these fences, like this fence here, and that fence. Closest to you is down in Cleveland Bay. She's a thoroughbred. Yeah. She's a
Same
surrogate.
breed as
Ah.
I ride.
Yeah, so she does not have any genetic relation to this baby. She just carried him and birthed him. So she's not his genetic mother. His mom is actually the other mare in our pen. But we have bays that will do it. We have 3. We have a stallion and 2 geldings that will also do it.
These are definitely cute though, these babies.
Those are the adults. These guys won't grow to be very big.
maybe the size of
You like them? Okay. Okay, you don't touch it.
about this size. That would be the rooster, wouldn't it?
No.
And the roosters are always bigger. Well, you see the mom in there.
Yeah.
She's an adult. That's the
She's
size
full
that they'll
size,
grow. Yeah. You could come around this side, sweetheart. Yeah, come
sorry.
around the thing. You just have to have a promise.
There's 3 baby ones and 1 big one.
You can't hold them. I'm sorry. Yeah. They're
y'all want to do?
Don't wait for me in the hot sun.
We're gonna see if we can find more horses.
So they said, we will build this up as a staple Vermont. And that's what they did. But in the sense that they had a document or a photograph that said, this is a staple Vermont. Now,
How many people have been in here?
well, what we figure is the historians discovered the document on the right-hand panel of the book, and it says that the Presbyterians wanted to meet in a building behind Mr. Davenport's house. Which building would it be? Well, there's only two foundations.
has some brown. Australian sheepdog. Shepherd.
Is it nap time?
Yeah.
It's my nap time. That's for sure. Good day, welcome to Rich Parents Church. Please come on in and look around. You are welcome to take photographs. We are an active parish that's been worshiping for more than 300 years. Bye-bye. Thank you so much. Y'all have a fun afternoon.
Well, I grew up in Washington, and I took history in grammar school, in high school, and in college. And everything I know to this day, I've learned from Right. Well, thanks for coming.
The pool.
So this you appreciate
Yeah.
No kidding, right? Absolutely. Well, this is Mr. Witt's office. He was a really influential man during the Revolution, probably one of the most influential, actually. So he is,
As a young 17-year-old to use your senses. And what are your senses again?
Sight, smell, and taste, and hearing.
And touch.
Touch.
To understand the world around you. And that's why you walk up and down the York, the James River. You're collecting all these fossils, by the way. And this comes from the largest mammal on Earth today. Do you know what that mammal is? And when England has an economic interest, they're going to make sure they know the territory. The Caribbean, 1541, a lot of cities or a few cities. How many say a lot of cities? How many say a few cities, 1541?
Where?
The Caribbean.
Lots.
Yeah, turn the globe. Do you see the Caribbean?
Got it.
Yeah, there's a lot of cities there. You know why? The Spanish have conquered the Aztec and the
Drink of the spoon and then just went up and get it to land in the spoon.
No, it went on and then it
Oh,
Ooh, I got this one.
Oh, that's a good idea.
I'm good at flying. Kitties. Oh, little sweetie. Little sweetie, yes, you're a little sweetheart. Yeah. Like the warm outside. We got the sun.
Animals here than we're used to in European theater warfare. We don't have as much. But when we use them differently. We use them as intelligence gatherers, scouts, feeling out where the enemy is. When you do have the numbers, you use them to punch holes in the enemy line, hit them from the flank, or hit them in the rear. And that's what you're going to use on cavalry. Cavalry, their main weapon is a sword on horseback. They have a brace of pistols, sometimes as backup weapons. Sometimes they're heavy dragoons, meaning they have a sword. They They have a brace of pistols, and then they have a carbine or musketoon that they carry. It's able to be dismounted and hold ground as infantry comes up in support. Now on to artillery. Artillery guns like this one here, and you have siege guns. Coastal guns are going to be the large cannons. So cannons are rated by the weight of the projectile it throws. So when I talk about a 3-pounder, 6-pounder, and 9-pounder, it's a cannon that's rated to throw 3, 6, or 9 pounds of projectile. Those coastal guns are large. So they're 18-pounders, 24-pounders, 36-pounders, 48-pounders, 64-pounders. And they can fire a projectile roughly about 2 miles. In those situations, the cannons aren't maneuvered great distance. So they sit in forts, and they overlook the water, which you can see far. So you can throw things far and hit things at a distance. When you get on land, you don't want to have big guns to maneuver around. It's more difficult. The larger the guns are, the heavier they are to maneuver them around. It's hard enough to feed your army, but to feed the animals that move all those artillery pieces is another problem all in itself. So you're going to have lighter pieces. Field guns are lighter. This is an experimental piece known as a light 3-pounder. Now, experimental meaning that normal guns you find for supporting infantry are light 6-pounders, 9-pounders, sometimes 12-pounders, sometimes up to 18-pounders. So they're developing this one in the middle of the 18th century as a light artillery piece to easily maneuvered, easily to keep up with the infantry. And we'll demonstrate its mobility by having the crew maneuver it as they would on a battlefield. Now, siege guns are those rated to throw bombs, mortars and howitzers. And bombs are iron balls that are hollow, filled with gunpowder, have a wooden fuse knocked into it. When the fuse burns down to the bursting charge, it explodes. So you use mortars and howitzers when you lay siege to fortifications because they launch bombs up and over in a high trajectory so you can get behind those walls to bombard the enemy. Guns that you see being used during the siege at Yorktown. Now, this light 3-pounder is crewed by 6 men. You have matroses that are supporting the gun. We have 2 matroses today. You would see anywhere between 10 to 12 matroses responsible for the defense of the gun, for maneuvering the gun, the pass box, the ammunition. They're the ones moving at small distances. Today we've got the gunners situated with their drag ropes, and we will demonstrate first the manual according to the parade, which is a manual that stops at every little portion of the loading process. So you stresses, you learn the hand placement, body placement in relationship to the cannon and the use of your tools and your teammates. And then from that we'll progress to the battlefield commands, which are streamlined. So these commands and these manuals are practiced in peacetime, not so you can fire fast in combat, but you can fire without having to worry about thinking of anything. You've developed a rote memorization to do this because combat is a situation that people aren't used to. There's a lot of confusion, a lot of adrenaline, a lot of noise. You're not thinking straight. So what you're doing is developing rote memorization to do something in a complicated time like combat. So we'll start with the parade drill. Gun Sergeant, go ahead and load by the parade drill. The first tool you use is called the worm. It looks like a corkscrew. His job is to remove any bits of smoldering cartridge left behind from the last shot. After you worm it out, then you sponge it out. The sponge is lamb's wool on the end of that pole that is dampened by a bucket of water. His job is to extinguish any sparks. After you worm it and sponge it, you can introduce the next cartridge up. Our charge is made out of an aluminum bag that holds 4 ounces of cannon-grade powder. In the 18th century, they used cloth, so either flannel or linen, and the charge would be anywhere between 8 ounces to close to a pound of powder for that light 3-pounder. So we're using a fraction of the normal charge. It's rammed down by the other end of the sponge, which is the rammer. It's a ramming block. It allows the person at the back to pick a hole in the bag to create a fuse. Use a brass priming wire. We create a fuse by simply pouring gunpowder into the vent. And then after that, if the gun's ready to fire, you're ready to go ahead and cover your ears.
Ready. Good. Fire.
It didn't even knock a hole in that wall.
So that was the parade drill. It's fired by the linstock, practicing moving up the gun as if they were on a battlefield situation. It demonstrates how maneuverable this gun is. The tube is 175 pounds. The carriage is roughly about 300 pounds. All total is less than 500 pounds. You notice the recursives here are loading up. We're going to be firing muskets in support of this piece.
Load the piece. Coming about.
Now guns like these are designed to be known as battalion pieces. The regiment's going to have roughly 2 of these to support the regiment as it advances or retires on the battlefield. These guns can fire solid shot, but it's going to be more effective firing 3 pounds of musket balls either in a bag known as case shot or in a canister known as canister. It's going to fire to cover your ears. Or in a cannon known as canister. So it turns the cannon into a big shotgun. This light 3-pounder can fire a solid projectile roughly about a mile, but you don't engage the enemy outside of about 400 yards or so. This is all direct fire. You have no way of relaying information in a timely fashion. You have indirect fire at this time. So this is all direct fire. What you see is what you're shooting at.
Up, trails. Front, on.
They're going to plug through that wall there.
Take care. Halt. Out, trails.
So imagine.
Second try. Hey, Ellie. Again. Fire. Knee cover. Knee.
That's the last shot of the
If I put gold or silver threads in it. So it just kind of depends and what people are focused on. This is from our shoot here in Williamsburg. Tell because of the tight corkscrew right on the tip. It's never had a haircut before. And you can only get lamb's wool one time. So the lamb's wool sweaters you might see in the stores at the winter time is because it's more expensive because it's that first haircut, very, very soft.
Is it
We have to lose. They shoot, shuttle back and forth, you know. We used to make roads. They had big, 2-3 stories.
Sure. So this is 16th century technology, and right around this time they have 18th century technology, of course, over in England. Now they're not letting us see that modern stuff because they don't want us faking fabric or anything. But they have the flash of it is just pull a string and the shuttle rides in a track along that meter bar. But we don't have that. Fabric is the #1 export of England. Fabric is the #1 import of the colonies.
Matter on the stand, so that's what the wig looks like without that hair. So that little bit of stubble you both have is going to grip that mesh and keep it from sliding around. Do you ever get something?
I'll get into that one. So, the content we're going to be discussing is that idea of captivity between all these various different southeastern and northeastern tribes. The community that I come from is Cherokee, so we're really going to be discussing kind of the idea of where Cherokee utilizes this means of captivity. But some things between all these southeastern and northeastern tribes are kind of like connecting strands. There are some similarities between them, even though they're all very unique in their language, religious structures, social norms, families, government systems, etc. Captive taking and hostage taking is one of those binding strands that all these communities kind of practice between one another. So for Cherokee folks, you can kind of start with the idea that one of the hallmarks of our society is to maintain a balance. Everything has to be even. Everything has to be maintained in harmony. That's kind of the objective of our lives here on this earth. So if anything is ever lost, it has to be replaced. If anything is ever taken from us, we have to take it from somebody else. So by somebody else, that means anybody who is not considered a Cherokee person. So in the 18th century, Cherokee folks are considered Cherokee by their affiliations to clans within our society. And because we live under a matrilineal system, our clans and our lineages are always traced down through our mothers, through our women. So they're never traced down through the men. So when those children are given a clan, either by adoption or by birth, they can belong to one of 7 different clans. They can belong to Ani Shahone, which is the blue clan, Ani Wode, our pink clan, Ani Jisquan, our bird clan, Ani Golf Potato clan, our wild potato clan, Ani Waya, wolf clan, Ani Alve, which is our deer clan, and then Ani Gilohi, which is our long-haired clan. So for us, our families are one who we're directly related to by blood. These are like our moms, dads, grandmas, grandpas, our siblings, anybody within our same bloodline. But then we also belong to one of these 7 different clans, which is like an extended family. So everybody within that clan is considered as closely related to you as your blood kin. So everybody about my age range is all going to be considered like my brothers and my sisters. Anybody my parents' age, like all my aunties and moms, everybody my grandparents, and then of course younger siblings, etc. So because of that, you are never allowed to marry within your own clan, because that's like marrying within your own family. That's forbidden by our law. So you always have to marry outside to a different clan. And even when those marriages were being approached upon, or those courtships being approached upon, the matriarchs from those families would come together and kind of trace the lineage of their kin to ensure that even though they're from different clans, they are not related at any point by their father's side or etc. Because if it was found out that they were related, that courtship would not be allowed to proceed and not be allowed to continue. If it was found out that they weren't related, of course that could continue. So the reason why we get in the idea of these family structures is because that means that anybody who belongs to one of these 7 different clans is basically their ticket to be considered a Cherokee person. If you do not have one of these clans, or you do not belong to one of these clans in the 18th century, you are not considered a Cherokee person. You are coming from whatever community that you come from, mainly wherever your mother is from. So for instance, if a Cherokee woman marries an Englishman, those children are going to be considered Cherokee because of their mother. They take on her clan. If a Cherokee man goes out and marries a Tuscarora woman, those children are going to be considered Tuscarora because of their mother. So this is how we track who is part of Cherokee, who's within this bubble. Because outside of this bubble is everybody else. Not only just the tribes that we live next to, like Creeks, Chickasaws, Tuscaroras, Yuchi, Choctaws, Shawnees. That also includes all the new nations that are arriving from across water or being brought over from across water. So this also includes English, African, Dutch, French, Spanish, German, Danish, etc. All those folks are going to be considered as foreign to us in some instances as the tribes who live right next to us. Those are others. They're separate of us. So when we talk about the idea of losing something or something being taken from us, that's where we replace from those things. Because we can't take or replace from within our own bubble. It has to come from outside. So in the first realm of family, of something being lost, we can look at these ideas of, within our society, sometimes when people pass away through old age or disease or natural causes, the matriarch from that family can't task somebody from her kin to go out into a neighboring community to capture somebody to bring them back to replace a person who just passed away as part of a mourning process, to replace this individual. Sometimes she wouldn't do so nothing else would be done, nothing else needs to proceed in that. But for the sake of our conversation, let's say she does. So usually this individual is going to be a male, because this is going to be a dangerous task. They're going into neighboring territory, not enemy territory, neighboring territory, to capture somebody to bring them back to replace this person. So some of the accoutrements that they might take with them are things like ties that are specifically made for the purpose of binding up and tying these captives in this ritualistic manner. They might take with them belts or not collars, but belts or things that can be draped over the individual that contain imagery of, for instance, a set of houses with one house missing its arbor. It represents the idea that this house is not whole. This house is missing part of its structure. And this person who is adorned with these things is going to be the individual to replace that, to make that whole again. So when this person goes out there, they're capturing these individuals, and in some instances, we've heard it referenced that it has to be a woman for a woman, a child for a child, or a man for a man. And in other instances, because within Cherokee society, all men, women, and children, folks are considered equal amongst one another, it could be replaced with any other life that's going to be brought back to be adopted to replenish that family. So in capturing this individual, when they're bringing them back, there is a process of things that occur to kind of reflect that idea of them being taken or shedding off their former life to be introduced or adopted into a new life. So part of that is the idea of stripping them of their clothing, of wherever they come from. We've seen references of like English folks or soldiers being taken and stripped of their military gear, stripped of their European clothing, and then redressed in like a breech cloth, pair of moccasins, or maybe a rat skirt. Represents the idea that they're shedding off that former life, wherever they're coming from. Sometimes they were given rattles and they were made to sing songs that were referenced to being death songs. I don't know what these songs sound like, but the intent of this song was the idea that their former life was dying off. That former life that they came from has to die off, because for us, you can't exist in two places at the same time. So you can't be part of that society as well as a part of our own. So that part of your life has to die off. Now, when they bring this captive back to the community, to the village, I told you that we live under a matrilineal system of society. That means that our lineages are passed down through a mother. But we also, in a sense, sort of live under a matriarchal system of society. More so identified by division of labor. So really whatever you work on is under your jurisdiction, is what you own. So for our women, they not only look after the children, but they take care of the home, they build the homes, they tend the gardens, they look after the families, maintain the community. And so the jurisdiction all falls under her authority. So men have very little say with families, with the upbringing of children, or how households are run. That's entirely at the behest of the women. So if you think of our matriarchs as being my mother or my wife is the head of my household. My clan mother is the head of my entire clan, of my extended family. And then for my community, the village that I live in, my beloved woman is the matriarch of our entire village, of our entire community as a whole. So because of that, even though a man or myself, for instance, I go out there and capture this person, I'll bring them back, I don't have the authority to say whether or not this person has a right to be there. That has to go through the women. So these captives would be brought before those beloved women and those clan mothers, and they would decide by whatever idea that they have for themselves as to why this person is allowed to remain or has to be sent away. They're not allowed to remain. So again, for the sake of our purposes, let's say those women give their consent to this person to remain within this community, to become part of this community. They'll be brought in before those women, and they'll be redressed and clothed and bathed. And it's kind of like a reference to the idea of like a mother looking after their children. This person has to be one ritually brought in that sense, but more so the idea that they have to be purified. They have to be clean. Because nothing impure or nothing unclean is ever supposed to enter within our community, within our villages. So they have to go through that process. But once they're brought in, they'll be brought to that matriarch of that family who tasked an individual with first bringing in this captive. And they're going to be entering into a temporary status of captivity. This captivity means that they don't speak on their behalf. It means that they're not allowed to leave. They are kind of stuck in for that time being. But during this time, that doesn't mean that they're mistreated. They're not beaten. They're not starved. They're not made to work any more than anybody else is made to work. That's because this person, at the end of this period of captivity, when this woman decides to adopt them, they are going to become part of that family. They're going to be replacing the person who had passed away. And everybody else is supposed to look upon them as family, as part of their society and their community. So it doesn't do good to mistreat folks you're looking to bring in. But the purpose of this captivity is sort of like a transition period in which they're learning the language, the customs, the government structures, the religion, etc. Everything it is to be a participant, an active participant within that community. But this also means that, in the sense that because they don't speak for themselves, the person who puts their banner over, this woman who basically says, as a Cherokee person, I hold the equal rights and authorities of jurisdiction and freedoms that we enjoy within our own communities, I speak on this person's behalf who does not yet have that same authority. So, anybody who does offend them, anybody who does mistreat them, or anybody who does harm them, will have to answer to me, to my authority, to her authority. And so, that's kind of like their protection. And the best English translation that some folks take from this term is somebody who is owed. So for us, it's very different from the concept of European practice of slavery. This is merely a transition period of where they're learning their place. But anyway, after this period is over and this woman decides to adopt them, she now basically proclaims to everybody that this person is now part of her family. This person is part of her kin. And as such, she passes on her clan to this individual. The only way that this changes throughout this period of captivity in regards to genealogy is whether or not it's a male or a female, right? So those same systems of family law pass down to them because they're part of our community. So if it's a male, if he marries within Cherokee society, those children are still going to be considered Cherokee because of their mother. If it is a woman and she's adopted within Cherokee society, doesn't matter who she marries because those children are going to be considered Cherokee because of her lineage. Through her matrilineal system of family that she's now been brought into, those children will still continue within that same lineage, separate of wherever they come from. So this is how we get some reference to Europeans traveling in a Cherokee country, either they be soldiers or they be like traders or surveyors, etc. This is how they remark on finding people within our societies that don't look like everybody else by all outward appearances, but they dress like everybody else, they talk like everybody else, and most importantly, everybody treats them like everybody else. And in many instances, they get different stories. One lady was taken from a raid on her homestead. She was brought in and then adopted and then intermarried and having children by the man who had killed her husband. We had some folks who were taken in raids who had previously been enslaved by their previous captors and then brought into Cherokee society, adopted in, and lived as free people from that point on. Other tribes, folks who were captured and brought into Cherokee society and adopted in, really integrate into their new societies, into their new homes, because between the different tribal nations, consider it being that this practice has been done for so long and so often that it is expected. So we understand the terms of what that captivity means. So we know if somebody's being taken captive within the manner outside of conflict or war, that person is going to become part of that family and that society. But it's not like they're never going to see them again. Because once they're adopted, just like I said, they get the same rights and privileges as everybody else. So that means they have the right to vote in council, they have the right to hold office in council, to run their own households and their women, to look and to go out and hunt and fish and fight with all the other men, the same as everybody else, but also freedom of movement. So for us, we always travel between all these different communities for thousands and thousands of years between these tribes. So we know that some folks, once they're adopted, they have fulfilled the role that they were supposed to do. They have filled that void within that family. So some folks end up traveling back to where they came from to go visit their kin or stay where they're at and never go back to where they were from. So we have a lot of different, but that's more so in the realm of family. On the other end of maintaining a balance, an equality, a harmony, is the idea that if somebody takes something from us, we have to take it from them. This is when we get into the realm of blood law. This is again one of those kind of uniting strands between the southeastern and northeastern woodland tribes. There's the idea that whatever you do to us, we do to you in equal kind. Nothing more, nothing less. So when Europeans arrive, you can see some remarks of English folks saying those tribes out on the western frontier, they're always fighting and they're always at war with one another. In many instances, it's very true. But what they always omit is at the same time that we're at war with one community, we're in peaceful political negotiations with another community. But our terms of war are different. In some instances, our men don't go to war for gains of wealth, power, land, resources, or anything like that, or religious differences or ideology. War for us between these tribes is really just a way of alleviating any natural tensions and aggressions that build up over time. So in that balance of harmony, you can't always be for peace. That takes away the ability to feel anger, hate, frustration. If you're always at war and conflict, that removes your ability to feel love, kindness, compassion, happiness. So for us, we have to maintain those balances. So that has to be an avenue for those men to speak in council, and an avenue for those men to be able to carry out war and conflict. So within our society, war even doesn't involve everybody. So it's not like all the Cherokee community goes to war against all of Creek community. It's these Cherokee townships are at war with these Creek townships. And even still, it's only the men within those communities who are going to war against those men from their other communities. So for us in Cherokee, these men are what we call Atokleishki. Atokleishki basically means a man who likes to go to war, or somebody who likes to fight. Those are the only men who are carrying out that violence. So within the realm of that violence, folks who do not participate in this lifestyle are spared. Women, children, elder folks, full-grown men who are not warriors, who are considered non-combatants. They haven't chosen that life for themselves. So usually those are the ones who are going to be taken to be replaced as family. But warriors, men who have their hair shaved a certain way, they have tattoos and markings and things like that all over their body, scars and war wounds from their lifelong battles and stuff like that. That marks them as somebody who is of that same mind. So when they go to war, when they go into conflict, in some instances it's been carried out to the extent that we kill the same number that you've taken from us, but in some instances we will take some of your men as captive if we can get them as captive. And their purpose in being brought back to the community is to satiate that blood law, is to satisfy the women in the sense of their mourning and their pain and their suffering with the anguish and pain of this individual. So usually it's in the sense if you've chosen to live your life in war, conflict, and destruction, you're very much going to meet that same end because you've chosen that life for yourself. So sometimes when these warriors are bound up in their capture and they're brought back to those communities, they are again given to those women. But they're going to be tortured until they are executed by those women. This is again part of that mourning process, in the sense that when they torture this person by whatever means they deem necessary, it is a way of being able to alleviate their anguish and their pain and hurt from just having lost their fathers, their brothers, their husbands out in that previous conflict. But in the sense of that equality, this person is there to pay the debt for the transgressions of their community. So when this person's life expires, what has been taken from us has also been taken from them. That satisfies the debt. So when these women have expired this person's life, any pain, anguish, or frustration, or etc. that they have towards that community has now gone with this individual. This person has paid the blood debt for their entire kin, for their entire community. So we've lost our family, they've lost their family. That settles the debt, that settles that pain. So you see two instances of one as a means of family and replacement, and another one as a means of settling the score, in the means of vengeance. But on the other end, there is a means of political exchange of hostages back and forth. So when we come in to meet in council, if you've ever heard the term of like smoking pipe within those agreements, that is how we solidify our negotiations. The moment that we smoke, anything that had previously occurred to that event is all washed away. The moment that we smoke, all those transgressions, no matter who broke those things, no matter how bad it got, no matter what happened, that's all put in the past. It may as well have been 100 years ago. So that's how we restart this process. The cyclical process of war and peace is when we sit down and we smoke. But until we get to that point where we come in and sit down and speak across the table and smoke pipe with one another, things are kind of left in limbo. Yes, we can affirm ourselves to cease conflict or to cease fighting, but nothing is set in stone. So that's how we look at these 4 Shawnee headmen being brought here to stay in Williamsburg with the royal government. So Lord Dunmore had taken upon himself to expand the borders of Virginia beyond the proclamation line that was set in 1763 into the Ohio Valley territory. Unfortunately, those lands and those territories were occupied by the Shawnee Nation up in that region. So this created conflict. And a lot of folks say he went up there for a number of different reasons. There was no one specific cause. But when he went up there, it was a very bloody conflict and a very short-lived one. There was such a loss of life on both sides that they both came to the table to try and come to some peaceful conclusion or to some agreement. Well, in regards to the land that he was going to get, in some ways you can say he was successful. Never mind, we will say he was successful because he effectively expands the borders of Virginia up to the Ohio River, up in that region. So basically the agreement was England would claim east of the Ohio River and Shawnee folks would maintain west of the Ohio River. And to solidify that agreement, we would meet the following year to sign those treaties and those agreements and to exchange belts and to smoke pipe. So within this period of limbo, it was agreed that they would exchange hostages as kind of insurance, as collateral, to say that if any more conflict breaks out on one side or the other, these hostages are going to be there to forfeit their lives, to pay that debt. So 5 British officers go to stay up north at the village of Scioto as a guest of Chief Cornstalk, and Lord Dunmore requests of some of these headmen, their sons, to come stay with him here in Williamsburg. So we have 4 men. There's Wexacoppaway, Chinoosa, Neowa, and Katemwa, who are brought here to Williamsburg. Now, while they're here, in much of the same instance of folks where I told you they're not mistreated or beaten or starved or anything like that, these folks were not prisoners of war. They are here as the physical embodiment of their father's promises to ensure good relations on both sides. So they take on more of like a station of political ambassadors here to Williamsburg. So they are afforded all the niceties and kindnesses that any other European ambassador would be afforded staying here in Williamsburg. Like say a French or Spanish ambassador. So they're given carriage rides throughout the city. They're taken down to Norfolk to go see the ships and the forts. They're taken to go see Shakespeare. They're invited as personal guests to the party that Lady Dunmore holds for the birthnight of Queen Charlotte and the christening of Lady Virginia, in which they give a short speech there. And so while they're staying here, they're treated very, very well. They're treated very, very kindly. And so as time goes on, while they're here for that short period of time, one of them leaves. Westcoppa goes back up north as a way to kind of say things are going good. They're looking forward to the treating signings. The English are treating us very well. And then the other 3 that remain, Chinoosa, Neowa, and Katemwa, end up getting left in limbo. Because we know the following year, 75, that's when Lord Dunmore walks out the back of that palace and he never comes back, right? He goes out to his ship out on the York River and he leaves and he don't come back, but he leaves in Shawnee men here. So now there's a conflict of what to do. We know that Chinoosa leaves immediately. So he basically is of the mind that the governor has fled and left here, so our agreements are null and void. Anything we were held to, he has violated. We're going to be going back to war. So he leaves immediately back up north. And Virginia puts out a message to basically say, leave him alone, don't bother him, let him return up home. And the 2 other headmen, Katemwa and Neowa, we know they stayed for about another 2 months in treaty with the new Virginia government who's starting to take place here until they're actually given an escort to return back up home by the Virginians. Now, how that story works out a little bit later on, of course, a little story for another time. But the intent of that hostage exchange was exactly what it did what they were supposed to do. They were supposed to come here to serve as the embodiment of those promises until the following spring, when their fathers and those other headmen from the Shawnee Nation would meet with the governor and other legislation of the crown to solidify those arrangements and smoke pipe. So until we exchange those belts and smoke pipe, this practice of political hostages is one of the ways that we can ensure good behavior on both sides. So with that, we kind of look at the three different aspects of the means of captivity, and there's no kind of like guiding principle or rule that says this is how this thing works. Each of these things that I talked about is what we've seen on a case-by-case basis. Sometimes this happens, sometimes this thing happens. Sometimes these folks are allowed to stay, sometimes these folks are sent away. Sometimes these folks choose to stay for whatever reason they choose to, sometimes these folks choose to leave for whatever reason they choose to, right? So, with that, I'm going to stop talking, and I'm going to open it up for some questions. And I think we got about 5 or 8 minutes left over, so I want to see what y'all are interested in. And I do always ask my guests, please ask your questions as candidly as you can, because that's going to be the easiest way I can give you the answer that you're looking for, if I have one. If I don't, I'll tell you that also. But that also helps me too, because I know what to look for next time.
Yeah.
Also very much aware that many of you don't often have the occasion to bring your
today?
Good.
Good. Welcome to the Carpenter's Yard. Alright, this is where we primarily build buildings. So how we go about doing that is working with the archaeologists. Every time they build or dig a foundation or a footing of a building, it falls to us to put that building back. So today, however, we're in between jobs right now, so both of us are working up tools for ourselves. Gentleman right here is working on a new framing mallet. This is a tool we use to drive wooden items, so chisels, pegs, framing members, either which way. We use that to move material in a forward direction. What I'm working on is a plane, which is a shaping tool. It's going to help dimension the material the size and shape we desire it to be in.
This?
Yeah, so that's the handle that I most recently just made a slight mistake on, so I'm redoing it. Yeah. So I'm making cutting out the toe. Alright. So, yeah. Got a little bit of work to go before this is all said and done, but we're closing in on it pretty quick here.
Command, ready. With your fists center that target.
Oh, thank you.
You're welcome.
I've been talking for a while. Anyone have any questions, curiosities, wonderings, things that are unclear, things that I want to go over? Sure. Lots of people. Because remember, so George Washington's most obvious. You have generals who are trained in the British Army that include a man named Charles Lee, Charles Scott, a man named Horatio Gates. So all of these officers who were with the British Army, who are now sympathetic to the American cause, are helping to lead them. If we had any army that better than them, it was the Prussians. Again, all near Germany. And so Steuben, who was a pretty high officer of the Prussian army, comes to the United States, the colonies, and helps train. So you're having Steuben for training the American army to stand up to them. The magazine's built in 1716, and this is the original building. And so from 1716 to 1775, England would have supplied these guns to come here and be stored. Virginia being a British colony.
The governor is the only one who has the authority to create any treaties or negotiations on behalf of the crown.
What was that?
I didn't think it was supposed to lay down.
Flies are bugging them. Oh, the flies are bugging them.
The first ceremony of the day for the Continental troops was the reveille. The fifers and drummers, roused by the night sentries at daybreak, masked themselves and heralded the beginning of the soldiers' workday. Today's reveille march from Scotland is entitled, "Hey, Johnny Cope, are you woken yet?"
and drums to the front. March!
The military ceremony. Ladies and gentlemen, we hope you have enjoyed this demonstration from our Fife and Drum Corps.